I'm not gonna click on this link, but what you can do is you go on this, actually you can just go on the Wall Street Journal, because that's where this appeared, and I can give you this link or send you a link to my presentation. But you can go on this link and focus in on any county in the major oil and gas producing states, and you can see how many wells have been drilled since 1999 and where they've been drilled. It's really very interesting. My colleague from San Antonio, in the past I've been involved in doing some economic impact studies. You know, what happens when communities benefit from rapid energy development. Just let me touch on a couple of things. And these are old data because this study was done a long time ago. We actually did this for Devon Energy, and we were looking, among other things, at what happened to oil and gas property tax values between 2000 and 2005. And this is just when the shale revolution is getting started up in the Barnett. And we looked at the key counties in the Barnett. You know, a 1,600% increase in oil and gas property values from 340 million to almost 6 billion in 5 years, and I suspect they're twice that today. Another study that we did more recently was in upstate New York, Broome County, New York. Sits atop one of the sweet spots of the Marcellus. There were some people, particularly public officials, who were anxious to see energy development in their county, because they look across the Susquehanna River and they see the rigs and the trucks and everything else that's happening in Pennsylvania. So we use the same implant model that Dr. Tunstall uses, and we said, what if over a 10-year period, 2,000 wells were drilled in Broome County? Or what if 4,000 wells were drilled in Broome County? This is a county that's been losing people and jobs for 40 or 50 years. And you can see some significant increases in employment, and additional tax revenue, lots of additional spending and income. And then, of course, you also have kind of recurring economic impacts. You get one set of impacts when you're doing the drilling, but then you have ongoing production that creates additional jobs, additional revenue. That's all good for the community. If we had time, I'd tell you a story about what happened when I went up there and I made a presentation to the county commissioners, and some of the audience reaction was interesting. Suffice it to say, there is no drilling occurring in Broome County today, or anywhere in New York State for that matter, because there is a statewide moratorium on hydraulic fracturing. 2 years ago, the Maguire Energy Institute did a study. It was commissioned by the American Petroleum Institute, and they really asked us to look at a wide range of impacts on local communities that are undergoing rapid energy development. As I said earlier, jokingly, kind of the good and the bad and the ugly. And you can see this. You just go on our website. It's about a 100-page study with lots of footnotes. Just Google Maguire Energy Institute. We talk about lots and lots of things based on both academic studies and media accounts of what's happening in different places. And I'm not going to read all this. It's getting awfully close to lunch. But let me just talk about a couple of things, because this is what communities are most concerned about. This is what the media focuses on. And this is what the industry has to focus on as well, to put out the message that, yeah, there are some negatives associated. There is disruption, there is noise, there is traffic, lots of things, lots of, how should I say, uncomfortable, unpleasant things happen when a community, particularly a small community that doesn't have a history of mining, all of a sudden finds itself in the boom phase. And we all need to be attuned to what that means and to the sensitivities of people in the community. Sunday's New York Times had a front page story about a town in Montana up in the Bakken, and all of the terrible things that were happening there. Increase in traffic, noise, housing inflation, labor shortages, crime, prostitution, drugs, all these terrible things. They didn't talk at all in this article about the positive things. But then the New York Times hates the oil and gas industry, and they really hate Texas. I defy you to go through the New York Times for the last 10 years and find one positive article about the state of Texas. But that's a story for another day. But these are the issues that the media focuses on. And there are some diseconomies or disamenities that are associated with rapid energy development. I don't know how many trucks it takes to complete a well in the Permian Basin. But a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Bakken, and I was talking to the former governor of North Dakota, and he told me that it takes 1,000 truck trips to complete a well in the Bakken. That's a lot of truck traffic. You think about the people, the equipment, the sand, the water, the back and forth, the maintenance. And those trucks are noisy. And I mean, that is the reality. Compressor stations are noisy. And you know that crime and drugs follow the money. I mean, these are realities that the industry has to recognize, the communities have to recognize, that Luke has to recognize when he goes out and talks about all the benefits of energy development. There are negatives. I think all the negatives are manageable, but you got to acknowledge that they're there and have plans to mitigate those negatives. I love this map. This is America's energy belt. 46% of all the energy in the United States comes from this belt. Well, I always think of a belt going horizontal. This is a vertical belt, but it starts in the Dakotas, it comes down to Texas. And it's not that we got most of the oil and gas production, we got most of the wind production in the United States, and we got a fair amount of the coal production as well. I think everybody's kind of talked about this morning. The U.S. is becoming less and less dependent on imports. That's true. Imports as a percent of consumption, or I think they're lower today than they've been in 30 or 40 years. Domestic production has been rising as imports have been falling. And the reality, but we tend to forget, most of the oil we import comes from Canada and Mexico, friendly countries. I think only about 8% of our imports, no, actually about 8% of our oil consumption today comes from OPEC, and half of that comes from Saudi. But remember, the Saudis are selling their oil to their refinery in Port Arthur, which I think is the largest refinery in the United States. So, OPEC right now is not much of a factor on the global market, and they really are worried about the shale revolution and what it may be. We've seen some recent forecasts that within a couple of years the United States is going to reclaim its throne as the #1 oil-producing country. And I think that will happen as long as government doesn't get in the way. The reality is we're already #1 if you think about oil and gas together. If you express natural gas in barrels of oil equivalency, we're already #1. You see that in 2013. This is U.S., which is colors again. The blue is the gas, and the dark color is the oil. You add up all those barrels, and this year we're the #1 oil and gas producing country in the world. Russia is second. United States, Saudi Arabia is #3. So, we're #1. We should shout it from the rooftops. We're #1. Now, I'm not making a political statement, but you would think think this is something that our administration would embrace. But our administration rarely acknowledges the fact that we're the world's #1 energy producer. We're #1 in natural gas. We're #1 in wind. We're #1 in nuclear. We're #1 in coal. We're #2 in oil. And we're soon going to be #1. And if we're smart, we're going to remove the restrictions on oil exports and start getting the business of selling our oil abroad where it makes economic sense, as well as our natural gas where we are seeing some progress. So this is an exciting time. There's lots of positive things happening in the energy business. There are, as I said, some negative consequences that attend rapid energy development, but we're #1, Texas is #1, Permian Basin is #1, so this is a good place.